I was born into a house where love was not equal, where favoritism was not hidden but displayed openly like some trophy, where my younger brother David was the sun around which our parents' world revolved, and I was just a shadow meant to follow and assist. If you think David resented me because of jealousy, you would be wrong. There was no need for him to be envious because he was the favored child, the one our mother doted on, the one our father praised, the one who could do no wrong. From the very beginning, I was expected to be self-sufficient, to take care of myself, to help David with his homework, to lend him my things, to forgive his cruelty, to laugh off his taunts, and to carry the burden of being the older brother who must endure silently. My mother treated him like a prince, cooking his favorite meals, doing his laundry, defending his every misdeed as harmless boyish fun. For me, she offered little more than passing glances, as though I were an obligation rather than a son. Whenever I spoke directly, saying things as they were without sugarcoating, she saw it as disrespect, as rudeness, and this hardened her perception of me. My father was often at work, distant but stern, and though he sometimes tried to be fair, the scales were already tilted. David was loud, brash, reckless, just like my dad, while I was quiet, introverted, preferring books and solitude. Somehow this difference made me the odd one out, the family scapegoat. As children, David's bullying started with teasing about my glasses, my height, my awkwardness. He would sneak into my room, read my diary aloud to humiliate me, then twist my words to get me in trouble with our mother. If I dared to complain, she dismissed it as harmless, insisting this is how brothers bond. When he placed small stones in my cereal bowl hoping I would break my teeth, I caught them just in time, but even then my mother brushed it aside, saying boys will be boys. I learned quickly that in my house I would find no sympathy, no shield against his cruelty. At school I was already battling my own tormentors, kids who mocked me for being quiet, for looking different, for being the nerd. David, instead of defending me, joined them. He called me ugly loser, hairy monkey, failure, and he laughed when others pushed me around. He seemed to take joy in amplifying my pain, in sharpening my insecurities until they cut deep. One fight over something trivial ended with him shouting that I should kill myself. I had already been struggling silently with my mental health, and hearing those words from my own brother nearly broke me completely. My father remained largely absent during these years, always working, while my mother scolded me for provoking David. It was always my fault. I had irritated him. I had overreacted. I was too sensitive. The cycle continued, each insult and prank a reminder that I was alone in my own family. But the cruelty reached a point even my father could not ignore. One evening in high school, David tried to set my hair on fire, laughing as if it were just another prank. This time my father happened to be there. He saw the flame, saw my fear, and for once he did not dismiss it. He threatened to call the police on David, and for the first time in his life my brother looked truly stunned. He was not used to facing consequences, not used to hearing the word no. Later that night my father came to my room, and for the first time in years I felt seen. He admitted that he had waited too long, hoping David would outgrow his cruelty, but instead he was becoming worse. My father told me he was proud of me for enduring, for being stronger than I knew, and I nearly broke down in tears because those words were ones I had longed to hear. I confessed everything then, the years of bullying at home and at school, the stolen money, the insults, the loneliness. My father's face hardened as he listened, and the next day he went to the school principal to demand action. He also enrolled me in MMA classes at the local gym, telling me that I had to learn to defend myself, to stop letting others decide my worth. At first it felt ridiculous, a skinny nerd with glasses trying to learn how to fight, but something inside me burned brighter each time I trained. For the first time I was in control of my own body, shaping it into strength, channeling my pain into discipline. I balanced my studies with daily workouts, and slowly I saw the change in myself, in the way I carried my shoulders, in the way I looked people in the eye. The first real test came one afternoon when David stole my pocket money. I had been saving for weeks, working small chores, putting away every dollar carefully. David sneaked into my room and grabbed the cash, then ran outside to cycle away with his friends. I caught him just in time and demanded he return it. He sneered, taunting me, saying I could only cry to Daddy for help. Something inside me snapped. Without thinking, I punched him square in the face. His eyes widened in shock as he stumbled back, collapsing onto the ground. I pulled the money from his pocket and pushed him down again. David began crying loudly. The golden boy reduced to tears, and though part of me felt guilty, another part of me savored the justice. My mother rushed outside, horrified to see her precious son crying, and when she learned I had hit him, she turned on me instantly. She scolded me, saying I should be a better role model, saying I had no right to hurt him, completely ignoring the fact that he had stolen from me. But when my father arrived, his face dark and grim, he demanded the truth from both of us. I told him how David had stolen my money, how I had saved it through chores, how I only fought to defend what was mine. David tried to justify himself, saying he needed the money for a date, that as his brother I should have helped him. My father's response cut through the air. He told David that he was lucky I only punched him, because anyone else would have called the police. He made it clear that stealing was not just mischief, it was a crime, and that David had no right to take what was not his. For once David was the one who faced consequences. My father did not let my mother protect him this time. David screamed that he hated me, stormed to his room, and locked the door, but the balance had shifted. He could no longer bully me physically, no longer treat me as his punching bag. Though he still hurled insults when our parents were not around, he had learned that I was not so easy to break anymore. As the years passed, David grew angrier, more short-tempered, more bitter. I focused on my studies, on building a future for myself, while he seemed to spiral into recklessness. The divide between us widened, and though part of me still hoped one day he would change, deep down I knew he never would. He had tasted too much favoritism, too much indulgence, and he believed the world owed him everything. That belief would one day destroy him. Adulthood brought me freedom, but not peace. I left for college determined to carve out a life that was mine alone, away from David's shadow and my mother's constant dismissals. For the first time in years I felt air in my lungs, a chance to grow without being compared, ridiculed, or undermined. The city where I studied was not far from home, but it felt like a different universe. Nobody knew me as the awkward boy with glasses, nobody cared about my brother, nobody saw me as second best. I buried myself in books, joined study groups, trained at the gym, and little by little transformed into someone who finally felt worthy. David stayed behind, drifting aimlessly. He hated school and skipped classes whenever he could, bragging about fights, girls, and reckless adventures. My parents, especially my mother, continued to protect him, excusing his laziness by claiming he was just finding his way. My father grew quieter, tired of arguing, tired of seeing his warnings ignored. Every phone call home carried the same theme. Your brother is struggling. Your brother is angry. Your brother says you think you are better than him. I would listen in silence, knowing that no matter what I did or how far I went, David's resentment was growing like poison. When I returned home during holidays, the distance between us was undeniable. I had matured, disciplined myself, set goals, while David seemed stuck in the same cycle of rage and entitlement. He mocked me for studying too much, for speaking politely, for having ambition. He called me fake, boring, a wannabe intellectual. Yet beneath the insults I saw something else. Envy. My independence reminded him of what he lacked. My confidence highlighted his insecurities. And because he could not admit it, he doubled down on hatred. The tension came to a head one summer when I returned home after finishing my degree. I had been offered a promising job in a financial firm, something that could set the foundation for my future. My father was proud. Even my mother offered half-hearted praise, but David seethed. He was working odd jobs, quitting each after a few weeks, blaming bosses, co-workers, or bad luck. At dinner, he made snide remarks about my new suit, about how I thought money would make me a man. He laughed bitterly, saying no one liked me anyway, that I would die alone with my books and my rules. I ignored him at first, but deep inside I knew his bitterness would not end there. Life moved forward. I built my career, moved into my own apartment, started earning enough to stand on my own feet. I kept training at the gym, not for fighting, but because discipline had become part of me. I made friends, dated, and slowly built a life that felt stable. Meanwhile, David's life unraveled further. He drank too much, crashed his car twice, lost jobs, and burned bridges with almost everyone. Still, our mother coddled him, saying he just needed time, saying he would turn things around. But I knew better. I knew that years of favoritism had turned him into a man who believed consequences were optional. The final fracture came not because of words or insults, but because of betrayal I never expected. By then I was married. My wife was intelligent, kind, supportive in ways my family never had been. With her I felt seen, valued, and loved for who I was. She knew about my brother, about the years of cruelty, but she never met him until one family gathering. At first she tried to be polite, tried to treat him like any other relative, but David was David. He flirted shamelessly, made crude jokes, and insulted me in front of her. She laughed it off, thinking it was immaturity, but I saw the glint in his eyes. As months passed, David inserted himself into our lives more than I liked. He showed up at our apartment uninvited, called my wife to ask for favors, always pretending it was harmless. I confronted him more than once, told him to respect boundaries, but he would grin and say I was paranoid. My wife reassured me, said he was annoying but harmless. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that David's hatred was only for me, not something that could infect my marriage. But I was wrong. The day I discovered the truth remains burned into my memory. I had left work early, planning to surprise my wife with dinner. When I opened the door, the sound of hurried movement echoed through the apartment. My heart dropped as I stepped into the bedroom and saw them together. My wife. My brother. The betrayal hit me like a knife twisting in my chest. David smirked, almost proud, while my wife stammered apologies that rang hollow. My vision blurred with rage and disbelief. Years of torment, years of cruelty, and now he had taken the one person I thought was safe from his reach. I did not strike him, though every muscle in my body screamed too. Instead, I told him to get out, my voice low and shaking with fury. My wife begged me to listen, but I could not. David left the room laughing, as if he had finally won some twisted victory. That night my marriage ended, and with it the last piece of my innocence. I filed for divorce, cut ties with my wife, and swore I would never let David near me again. Word spread through the family quickly. My mother blamed me, saying I had pushed David away, saying I had neglected him, saying I should forgive. My father said little, but the disappointment in his eyes was heavy. I wanted to walk away completely, to erase them all from my life, but blood has a way of pulling you back even when you don't want it to. For a while I focused solely on work. Success became my armor, money my shield. I worked long hours, rose through the ranks, and eventually inherited the family business after my parents passed away. With their passing came the $2 million inheritance, all left to me. They had seen what David had become by then, seen the destruction he left in his path. For once the scales tilted in my favor, though the cost was immense. David was furious, screaming that I had stolen what was rightfully his, that I was the golden child now. The irony stung. All his life he had been favored, and yet he still found a way to play the victim. He came to me then, desperate. His drinking had worsened, he had debts, and his so-called friends had abandoned him. He stood at my door, hollow-eyed and trembling, asking for help. He said he had no one else, that I was his only family, that he needed me. I looked at him and saw not my brother, but a parasite who had fed on my pain all his life. My anger boiled, but beneath it was a strange pity. Here was the boy who once mocked me, who once told me to kill myself, now reduced to begging at my doorstep. But pity does not erase betrayal. David stood there at my doorstep trembling, his face pale, and eyes bloodshot as if he had not slept for days. His clothes hung loose, his hair was unkempt, and for the first time in years I saw him without the arrogance that had always defined him. He looked like a man broken, stripped of the bravado he once wore like armor. He tried to force a smile, the same grin that had mocked me through childhood, but it crumbled quickly into pleading. He told me he had debts, that dangerous people were after him, that he had no job, no home, and no friends left willing to take him in. He said he knew he had hurt me, but begged me to help him anyway, because I was his brother and family should not turn their backs on each other. The word family echoed in my head like a curse. How many times had that word been thrown at me as an obligation while I endured his cruelty? Family when I was forced to give him my time, my money, my privacy. Family when my mother excused his abuse. Family when he mocked me for being different. Family when he took the one woman I thought I could trust. Now suddenly family was supposed to mean forgiveness. I stood in silence, staring at him, wondering how someone who had built his entire life on breaking me down could now expect me to hold him up. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face and never open it again. Another part, quieter but stubborn, remembered the boy he once was before the bullying, before the cruelty hardened into malice. I remembered the times we had played together as children, fleeting moments before everything soured. I hated that those memories still existed, hated that some fragment of me still longed for a brother who never truly existed. I told him to leave, my voice steady, though inside my chest my heart pounded with rage. He fell to his knees, clutching at my leg, tears streaming down his face. He promised he would change. He swore he would make it up to me. He said he would die if I abandoned him now. His desperation was raw, almost theatrical, but there was no mistaking the terror in his eyes. He believed every word because he had nothing left to lose. I let him stay that night, not out of forgiveness but calculation. I wanted to see what he would do when given a second chance, whether he would use it to crawl back to life or whether he would sink further into the pit he had dug for himself. I gave him food, a couch to sleep on, and nothing more. He ate greedily, as if he had been starving, then fell into a restless sleep filled with mutters and groans. I sat awake long after, staring at him, wondering what justice really meant. Was it revenge, watching him suffer as he had made me suffer, or was it forcing him to face the life he had built with his own hands? In the days that followed, David tried to act grateful. He offered to clean, to cook, to run errands, small gestures that seemed foreign coming from him. Yet beneath the surface I could see the same patterns re-emerging. He borrowed money without asking. He lied about where he went. He came home drunk more than once. I began to realize that he had not changed, that he could not change, because his entire life had been built on taking from others. He knew no other way to survive. One night, he stumbled in bruised and bloodied. He admitted between sobs that loan sharks were after him, that they had threatened to break his legs if he did not pay back what he owed. He begged me for money, not just a small amount, but tens of thousands, enough to cover his gambling debts and his drinking tabs. He said I had inherited millions, that it would not hurt me, that it was my duty as his brother. That word again, duty, as if my entire existence was meant to serve him. I refused. His face twisted with the familiar hatred I knew too well, the mask slipping back into place. He screamed that I was selfish, that I had always looked down on him, that I had stolen everything good in life. He said even our parents had abandoned him because of me, that their inheritance should have been his, that I had manipulated them into leaving it to me. He spat venom, but this time I did not cower, did not shrink under his rage. I simply told him the truth, that his life was the result of his choices, not mine, and that I owed him nothing. His rage escalated into violence. He threw a glass against the wall, shattered it into shards that scattered across the floor. He lunged at me, fists raised, but years of training had hardened me. I blocked his strike, twisted his arm, and pushed him back easily. He stumbled, panting, glaring at me with the same eyes that had mocked me as a child. But now the power dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the bullied boy. I was the man who held all the cards, and he knew it. For the first time in our lives, David looked small to me. Not just physically, though his body was weakened by years of neglect, but in spirit. He was a hollow shell of the brother my parents had once adored. I realized then that revenge was not something I had to take. Revenge had already unfolded on its own. His life was the punishment, his misery the justice. Every cruel word, every betrayal, every humiliation he had inflicted had come back to rot him from the inside. I did not need to destroy him. He had destroyed himself. But justice still demanded a choice. I could help him and risk being pulled down into his chaos, or I could cut him off forever and let him face the consequences. Neither option brought me peace. Neither erased the years of pain. As I stood there watching him clutch his arm, cursing me under his breath, I realized I was standing at the edge of something final. The inheritance, the house, the business, my entire future, it was all mine now. And David was nothing but a shadow begging for scraps. He begged again the next morning, quieter this time, his arrogance dulled by pain. He said he would do anything if I just paid his debts. I looked him in the eyes and told him no. That single word broke him. He collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, repeating over and over that he had nothing, that he would die without me. I turned away, heart heavy but resolved. I had spent my entire life carrying his weight. Now he would have to carry his own. That was the day I set him free, or perhaps abandoned him, depending on how you see it. I told him to leave, to never come back, and I watched as he packed what little he had and walked out the door. I thought it would be the last time I saw him. I thought the chapter of David in my life had finally closed. But I was wrong, because men like David do not disappear quietly. They return, not out of love or regret, but out of spite. And his return would not just test me, it would set into motion a scandal that would shake everything I had built. Weeks passed after David left, and for the first time in years my life felt calm. The silence of the house was almost strange at first. No drunken footsteps stumbling through the hallway. No desperate pleas for money. No shouting matches late at night. I poured myself into work, into rebuilding my life with the inheritance that had given me freedom. Every morning I woke up with a sense of control I had never known. I told myself David was gone for good, that he would fade into the distance, swallowed by his own mistakes. But deep down I knew better. My brother was like a storm, destructive and unpredictable, and storms always return. It started with whispers. A colleague at work mentioned that someone had been asking questions about me, digging into my past. Then I noticed unfamiliar cars parked on my street, men loitering nearby pretending to smoke or talk on their phones. At first I thought it was paranoia, until one evening a journalist approached me as I left my office. He asked if I wanted to comment on allegations about financial misconduct, about family disputes, about inheritance battles. I froze, stunned, because I had done nothing wrong. But the journalist smiled knowingly and said my brother had been very forthcoming with his side of the story. David had gone to the media. He painted himself as the victim, the abandoned younger brother cheated out of his rightful share of our parents' inheritance. He claimed I had manipulated them into leaving me everything, that I had brainwashed them against him, that I had always been cruel and selfish. He twisted our childhood into a tale where he was the bullied one and I the bully. He told them I had thrown him out onto the street while sitting on millions of dollars. The narrative was perfect for tabloids hungry for scandal, a story of greed and betrayal between brothers. Soon articles began appearing online. Headlines screamed about family betrayal, about a millionaire abandoning his destitute sibling. My face appeared on blogs I had never heard of, accompanied by words like cold-hearted, greedy, selfish. Strangers flooded my social media with hateful comments. Neighbors looked at me differently, whispering when I passed. Clients began to hesitate, asking questions about my integrity. David had done what he always did, turned my life into chaos. Only this time he had an audience eager to believe him. I wanted to ignore it, to let the storm pass, but it only grew worse. One night as I walked home, a man stepped out of the shadows and blocked my path. His face was hard, his voice sharp as he demanded payment on David's debts. He said my brother had assured him that I would cover everything, that I was the rich older brother who owed him. When I refused, the man shoved me against the wall and warned me that accidents happen to stubborn people. He left me shaken but unhurt, yet his message was clear. David was not just smearing my name. He was dragging me into his mess with dangerous people. I tried confronting him, tracking him down at the dingy motel he had been living in. He looked worse than ever, eyes wild, hands trembling, the scent of alcohol heavy on his breath. He laughed when I accused him of spreading lies, saying the truth was subjective and people believed what they wanted to believe. He said the world loved a tragic victim, and he was simply giving them a story they craved. He leaned closer, his grin mocking, and whispered that if I wanted him to stop, I would have to pay. It was extortion wrapped in brotherhood, blackmail disguised as reconciliation. I walked away, fury boiling in my chest. Paying him would only feed the monster, but refusing meant the scandal would continue to grow. I found myself caught in the same trap I had lived in all my life, dancing to his tune, forced into choices that only benefited him. For days I wrestled with my anger, wondering how to fight back without sinking to his level. Then came the breaking point. A news outlet published an article claiming I had cheated on my wife, that my marriage had crumbled because of my infidelity. They printed fabricated text messages, fake witnesses, even a supposed mistress who had sold her story. None of it was true, but truth mattered little to those who wanted scandal. My wife, who had already left me years ago thanks to David's betrayal, now reached out in anger, accusing me of dragging her name back into the spotlight. My professional reputation, carefully built over years, began to crumble. Business partners canceled meetings. Friends stopped answering calls. It was then I realized David was not just desperate, he was dangerous. He would burn everything down if it meant getting attention, money, or revenge. And for the first time in my life, I decided I would not be his victim any longer. I hired a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but one known for tearing apart liars in court. We began gathering evidence, every drunken voicemail he had left me, every message where he admitted to gambling debts, every record of him borrowing and never returning. My lawyer tracked down witnesses, former friends who had cut ties with David, ex-girlfriends who had suffered from his manipulation, even old teachers who remembered his cruelty. Slowly we built a case, not just to defend me, but to expose him. When David was served with the lawsuit, he laughed, certain I would never follow through. But when the first hearing was scheduled, his confidence began to crack. He tried calling me, leaving messages begging me to drop it, alternating between threats and sobs. I ignored them all. For the first time, the power was shifting. He would be forced to answer for his actions, not in the court of gossip and tabloids, but in a real courtroom where lies had consequences. The night before the trial began, I stood by my window looking out at the quiet street. The city lights glowed in the distance, but my thoughts were fixed on the years behind me, the years of torment, betrayal, humiliation. Tomorrow, for the first time, my voice would be heard, my truth laid bare. David had tried to destroy me, but in doing so he had revealed himself. He had given me the chance to finally expose him for what he truly was. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, a thought struck me, sharp and cold. The trial would not just be about justice. It would be about revenge. And when it was over, there would be no going back. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The walls echoed with footsteps, the air thick with whispers of other cases, other tragedies, other battles. As I walked in with my lawyer by my side, I felt the weight of countless eyes on me. Some were strangers curious about the case that had become a local spectacle. Others were journalists ready to twist every word spoken inside. My name had been dragged through the mud, my reputation torn apart. But today I would speak for myself, and more importantly, David would be forced to answer for everything he had done. He sat at the defendant's table when I entered, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked disheveled, his suit wrinkled as if it had been pulled from a thrift store bin, but his eyes gleamed with a false confidence. He mouthed something at me as I passed, something I could not fully hear, but I knew the tone. It was the same arrogance he had carried since childhood, the same smirk he wore when he humiliated me, mocked me, bullied me. The judge entered, and the room shifted into silence. The trial began with the opening statements. David's lawyer, a cheap attorney who seemed more interested in theatrics than facts, painted him as the underdog. He spoke of a cruel older brother who manipulated their parents, who hoarded millions while his siblings starved. He spoke of betrayal, of a family divided, of a man left with nothing but heartbreak. It was a performance crafted for sympathy, and I saw a few people in the audience nodding along, ready to believe. Then it was my lawyer's turn. Calm and precise, she spoke not of drama, but of evidence. She laid out the truth, the years of abuse I had suffered at the hands of my brother, the debts he had accumulated, the lies he had spun to cover his failures. She told the jury this was not a case of inheritance or jealousy, but of accountability, of a man who refused to take responsibility for his actions and instead tried to destroy those around him. Her words cut through the theatrics like a blade, steady and clear. The witnesses began. First came one of David's old friends, a man who had once shared drinks and parties with him, but had long since cut ties. Under questioning, he revealed the gambling, the constant borrowing of money, the empty promises. He told stories of David bragging about how easily he could manipulate people, how he could spin lies so well that even his family would believe him. David's lawyer tried to discredit him, suggesting he was bitter over a broken friendship, but the testimony stood firm. Then came an ex-girlfriend, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with every word. She spoke of manipulation, of money taken under the promise of marriage that never came, of threats when she tried to leave. She described the same patterns I knew too well. The same charm turned to cruelty, the same desperation turned to rage. The jury listened intently, their expressions shifting as they connected the dots. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the weight of years pressing down on me. I sat in the witness box, hands steady on the wood, and told them everything. I spoke of childhood torment, of the bullying, of the lies he spread even back then. I told them about the cereal with stones, about the insults that cut deeper than any knife, about the time he told me to end my life. I described the betrayal with my wife, the chaos he brought into my home, the inheritance lies, the smear campaign. I laid bare the years of pain, not with anger, but with a calm honesty that even I was surprised by. David's lawyer tried to shake me, throwing questions meant to twist my words, to make me seem cold or bitter. He asked why I never forgave my brother, why I had not shared the inheritance, why I had not reached out to help him in his lowest moments. I answered simply, because every time I helped, he used it to hurt me. Because forgiveness is not an endless well, and my brother had poisoned it long ago. Because love cannot survive without respect, and he had given me none. Then it was David's turn. He swaggered to the stand with false bravado, smirking as if he were the star of a play. He spun his tale with practiced ease, crying on cue, painting himself as the broken man abandoned by a cruel family. He claimed he never bullied me, that I had always been distant and cold, that I resented him for being closer to our mother. He denied the gambling, denied the debts, denied the threats. He said every witness against him was lying out of jealousy or spite. But lies are fragile when held against truth. My lawyer pressed him, showing him text messages where he begged for money, voicemails where he threatened me, receipts from casinos, police records from drunken fights. Each piece chipped away at his performance, until his smirk faltered, his words stumbled. The jury watched as the mask slipped, revealing not a victim, but a manipulator cornered by his own deceit. The climax came when the prosecution played a recording, one I had saved from a late night, when David had left me a message too drunk to filter his words. In it he laughed about how easy it was to fool people, how he could twist any story, how one day he would make me pay for every time I had refused him. The room was silent as the recording ended, the sound of his cruel laughter still hanging in the air. The jury looked at him, then at me, and I knew the tide had turned. Closing arguments sealed it. David's lawyer tried desperately to salvage sympathy, but the damage was done. My lawyer spoke last, her voice steady as she reminded them of the truth they had heard, the evidence they had seen, the lies that had crumbled under pressure. She told them this case was not about inheritance or money, but about a man who had spent his life destroying others and now wanted to escape accountability. The jury deliberated for hours, though it felt like days. I sat in silence, every second a battle against the fear that somehow, despite everything, he might still find a way to win. When the jury returned, the room held its breath. The foreman stood, the words falling heavy in the air. The verdict was clear. David was guilty of defamation, guilty of extortion, guilty of the lies he had woven. He erupted in anger, shouting across the courtroom, pointing at me with wild eyes. He screamed that it was not over, that I would regret this, that I had stolen everything from him. The bailiffs dragged him away, his voice echoing like the tantrum of the child he had never stopped being. As the room emptied, I sat still, my hands shaking for the first time. The weight I had carried for decades began to lift, slowly, painfully, but surely. Justice had been served, but more than that, truth had been spoken, and the lies had been stripped away for all to see. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The days after the trial felt strangely quiet, as if the storm that had consumed my life for so long had finally passed, leaving behind only silence and wreckage. I walked through my house like a man relearning how to breathe. Every corner of the rooms carried memories of battles fought, lies endured, pain buried deep. But now those memories felt less heavy, no longer chains but scars, reminders of what I had survived. David was gone, locked away in a cell where his charm and lies could no longer poison the people around him. Yet even with him gone, I felt his shadow lingering, a part of me waiting for his voice to erupt once more, for another trick, another attack. Years of abuse had taught me that peace never lasted, that calm was only the pause before another storm. I struggled to believe that this time was different, that I had truly won. The press would not let it go so easily. Reporters hounded me for interviews, stories, commentary. They wanted drama, sound bites, a neat ending to package and sell. They asked me how it felt to see my brother fall, whether I would ever forgive him, whether I still loved him. I turned them all away. Some truths did not belong on the evening news. Some wounds were not meant to be displayed like trophies. But inside, the questions gnawed at me. Did I still love my brother, after everything he had done, after the betrayals and the cruelty? A part of me wanted to say yes, that blood could never be erased, that somewhere beneath the lies was the boy I had once played with, the boy I had once hoped would be my friend. Yet the larger part of me knew the truth. The boy I remembered had never truly existed. The brother I had hoped for had never been real. What I loved was an illusion, and what remained was only pain. The inheritance money sat untouched in my account, a heavy number on a screen that brought no joy. People envied me for it, whispered about how lucky I was, how fortunate to be set for life. They did not see the cost. That money was stained with years of bitterness, the final act of parents who had chosen sides until the end. It was never a gift, it was a burden, a symbol of a family broken beyond repair. Sometimes I thought of giving it away, all of it, to wipe my hands clean. But then I would remember the years I had worked silently, the nights I had studied while others mocked me, the battles I had fought alone. I had earned the right to peace, even if peace came wrapped in blood and betrayal. One evening, weeks after the trial, I received a letter. It was from David. My hands trembled as I held it, the envelope rough against my skin. For a long time, I debated tearing it apart without reading, but curiosity, or perhaps some lingering hope, won. The letter was messy, the handwriting jagged and angry. He blamed me still, said I had ruined him, stolen everything from him, destroyed his life. He said prison would not break him, that he would come back stronger, that I would see him again. But between the lines of rage, I saw something else, something I had never seen in him before. Fear. For the first time, David was afraid, and he could not hide it behind his usual mask. I folded the letter and locked it away. I would not respond. Some battles were fought not with words, but with silence. Time passed slowly, the days blending into one another. I tried to build something new, to fill the emptiness left by years of conflict. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned, books gathering dust, music I had once loved. I went back to the gym, not with the same desperate need to defend myself, but to remind myself of the strength I had earned. People began to notice a change in me. Friends who had drifted away during the chaos returned, cautious at first, but gradually warming again. They told me I looked lighter, freer, as if a weight had finally been lifted. I smiled but said little. Some truths could never be explained, only felt. Yet the nights were harder. Sleep did not come easily. I dreamed of David, of his laughter echoing through the walls, of his face twisted in anger, of his voice telling me I was nothing. I would wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the darkness of my room pressing in. Even in victory, he haunted me. Months later, the call came. My lawyer informed me that David had been attacked in prison. The details were vague, but the injuries were severe. He would survive, but barely. The news hit me harder than I expected. I should have felt satisfaction, some sense of justice in knowing he had finally tasted the pain he had inflicted on others. But instead, I felt only emptiness. Revenge had been served, but it did not heal me. I visited him once, against my better judgment. He lay in the hospital wing, his body broken, his face pale. When he saw me, his eyes widened, not with hatred this time, but with something else. Regret, maybe, or fear, or simply the recognition of a truth too heavy to deny. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. I stood there in silence, watching the man who had tormented me reduced to fragility. For the first time, he looked small, no longer the bully, no longer the golden child, just a man undone by his own choices. I left without speaking. Some words were not worth saying. Life continued. Slowly, painfully, but it continued. I learned to live not in the shadow of my brother, but in the light of my own strength. I traveled, saw places I had only dreamed of, met people who knew nothing of my past. Each step forward was a reminder that I was more than the scars he had given me, more than the battles I had fought. Yet the story never truly ended. It lived on in me, in the quiet moments when memory returned, in the scars I carried invisible but unyielding. Perhaps that was the final truth. Revenge does not erase the past. It does not heal the wounds. It only closes the chapter, leaving you to decide what comes next. And so I chose. I chose to live, to breathe, to walk forward. David would remain where he belonged, in the prison he had built for himself, both in stone walls and in the darkness of his own soul. And I would remain free, not because he had given me peace, but because I had taken it back. The story of my brother was not one of forgiveness or reconciliation. It was a story of survival, of enduring the worst and finding a way to rise above it. It was not the ending I once hoped for, but it was the ending I needed. As I stood one morning, watching the sunrise spill across the horizon, I realized something I had never felt before. The world was wide, the future unwritten, and for the first time, it belonged to me.